some distress markers. Now what's great about distress markers, obviously these are dual-tipped markers. Now with the addition of 12 new colors, we have those seasonal colors that are now part of the line. We released those in markers early, made a lot of people excited. We've got some bright colors. But I think it lends itself to a little bit more explanation as to still how you can color with them, because they're really easy to work with. So I'm just going to talk about surfaces first of all. This is specialty stamping paper. This could be a coated paper and uncoated paper. There's that type of paper. We have tags. I'll grab a tag, because I like to work on manila tags. But one of my favorite ways to use distress markers, of course, is watercolor paper, because it's really what it's designed for. It's designed to blend. So we came out with distress watercolor cardstock. Now, watercolor paper, you can certainly go to an art store and you can buy a pad of watercolor paper, but what I found is that you would either buy cold press, which is going to be bumpy, or hot press, which is smooth. This is going to be textured on one side, smooth on the other. And you can use either side, they will blend equally, okay? What's really important to understand though when we talk about the blendability is that different papers, of course, are going to blend different. So if I take a marker and let's color on manila, let's color on a coated paper, and let's color on watercolor paper. I'm just going to go in with the water brush. Let me just kind of get some water in there. I've got some brown in there. It's cheating. All right. If I go in on manila and try to blend, it's not really going to blend that well. If I try to go on a coated paper, it's going to blend a little bit, and most people would expect that to blend a lot because it's coated. They think it's going to go everywhere. And now we have our watercolor paper. And our watercolor paper is what's going to give up the color. It's going to allow you to spread that around. That makes a big difference when you're working with these. So let's just quickly go through and stamp an image just to show you. Of course, if I'm going to stamp an image, I would prefer to work on the smooth side. Okay? I'm totally fine with ink through. And so you're like, oh, I need another piece. No, I call that bonus. Okay.
Is it the old size?
No, it actually is sold in 8.5 by 11. Okay. 8.5 by 11 sheets, and that's called watercolor paper.
Yeah.
All right.
But
And
the
this
distress watercolor paper.
and this is distress watercolor cardstock. Because it's the exact same paper, but because I get to name my product, I'm like, it's cardstock, people. It's not paper. There's a difference. Paper's thin, cardstock's thicker. But why we did that, we actually started doing that about a year ago with our gloss paper and our alcohol ink cardstock. We found that from a craft perspective, when you're going in looking for the surface, I mean, just like you saw here, the right surface makes all the difference. So like with our alcohol ink, we've had glossy paper for years. But people would see that and go, oh, I have gloss paper at home, and they try to use alcohol ink on gloss photo paper, and they didn't have any good luck. They were like, this doesn't even work. So we're like, you know what? We need to take that paper and put it with the product that it works with. So we took the same paper, cut it up, so it's already pre-cut for card makers, or, you know, a lot of people love Project Life, so that's really great that you have pre-cut paper, and you can cut this down into smaller portions, and like the alcohol ink cardstock, people could connect the dots. Same thing with this. So distress watercolor cardstock, they're like, oh, that's the paper I would use to use distress with. That's it. So if you want bigger sheets, it's going to be exactly the same for you. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to go in with some archival ink, and I'm going to stamp on the smooth side. Now, what I like when I'm working with small stamps on a grid block, I like to work with a longer grid block because I have pork chop fingers. So when I try to hold on to a little stamp, I end up dropping it or stick my fingers on there, so that allows me to use a mini stamp real easy. Then we're going to just go in and color. When we go in and color, one of the things that I think it's important for people to understand, especially if they want to create a watercolor effect, watercolor is going to require two things, water and color. So that means you can't go in and color the whole thing solid and then expect to get that watercolor look. So I've just added some color in just a few areas, and I'm going to go with my water brush and blend it out. Could not be easier. And then I'm going to dry it. It's also important, if you want to build intensity or layers of color, you need to dry in between layers. So I'm just going to dry that with a heat tool. If you don't want to use a heat tool, you could take a paper towel, you can go right in there just the same. Now I can go back with my marker. I can even add more shadow if I want. If I want to work with some different colors, maybe we want to go in and just do the leaf, we can do that. Maybe if I want to go in and just do the little stem, I can do that. And I'm just going to add just a hit of color, and then I can go back with my water brush and I can blend that. All right, put that there, put that there. Now for shadow, I like different colors for shadows, but if I'm going to create a shadow, I'll scribble on the craft sheet. You can use frayed burlap, you can use pumice stone. We have ice spruce, that's really a great color. But that's just going to add a little bit of interest kind of around your area, and then we're going to dry it. I said it makes you look like you know what you're doing, but I haven't shown you the trick I learned yet. Because so far you're like, yeah, we kind of been there, done that. Saw this in the last one. Here's what's cool. So my friend Shell Fowler, she did a lot of the samples you see in the booth, a lot of the colored image, and I'm like, your watercoloring is like ridiculous. How do you do it? She's like, oh, it's just water and color. I just take the distress markers and whatever. I'm like, yeah, I got that, but you're doing something. She's like, no, I have no secrets. I'm like, okay, you just sit there and color and I'll watch you. And what she did is she colored just like I did, and then she went and picked up the marker and she picked up just whatever color she was working with, and she got to the fine point. I'm like, what are you gonna do with that? She's like, oh, I always take a fine point and I go back and I add color on the stamped line. And I'm like, on the stamped line? She's like, yeah, you can go on the stamped line or just inside the stamped line, and that's gonna start building a whole interest of shadow on your stamped image. And that gives the entire thing more dimension. So even on the leaf, we're gonna go right in, go into that fine point, and you're just adding lines. So you don't have to go in and retrace the entire stamp, but you do go in right on your stamped line. That's what's weird. And look at the difference of dimension that it gives. Isn't that crazy? That's so easy.
Who asked you?
Shell Fowler, yeah. So she does the watercoloring. When I saw that, I'm like, that's a trick. She goes, oh, don't people do that? I'm like, no, I don't think so. I didn't do that. I normally color. I'm like, oh, I'm good. But that really gives it a whole nother dimension. So distress watercolor cardstock, distress markers, makes things easy.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks.